Flood and Build Back Better session. I'm Rosie Wilmot. I'm in the Sustainability and Climate Change team at Herefordshire Council. I'm just facilitating the session today. We'll be hearing directly from representatives from Flood very shortly. If you have any questions throughout for any of the speakers, if you could pop them into the chat as we go along, that'd be great. We can pull those out at the end. But just type them out as they come in to yourselves, and we can address all of those. We've got a nice bit of time at the very end to address all of that with our speakers. I'm going to hand over now to Councillor Philip Price, the Cabinet Member for Transport and Infrastructure, in lieu of Councillor Mason today. He's going to give us a short introduction. So Councillor Price, over to you.
Yes, thank you, Rosie. I'm very sorry that you have to have me at the last minute. Councillor Mason sends his apologies. He's unable to carry out this function this morning or even this afternoon now. But so I'm reading his note for introduction. So this is the first of a series of webinars we are running as part of our flood response programme to cover various aspects of flooding in the county. All of these are being recorded and will be available on the website as resources. Today is an important briefing about the Flood Re and Build Back Better schemes, which are a vital part of the insurance landscape for properties that flood. In particular, the Build Back Better scheme can help homeowners who are flooded get up to £10,000 of funding to protect from future floods. But I shouldn't steal their headline, so over to you and Rosie, if you'd like to carry on your good work. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Price. Thank you. Brilliant. So as Councillor Price has mentioned, we'll be hearing directly from Flood Re. We'll be hearing from Emma Holroyd, who is Flood Re's Market Engagement Manager. Emma's going to take you through how Flood Re was set up, its purpose, how it operates, how to check eligibility for the scheme, and how householders have already benefited from the scheme since its launch, which was nearly 10 years ago, so 2016, the commitments of Flood Re for the future, and looking specifically at their Build Back Better scheme, how it works and how it can be accessed. So over to the expert, Emma. I'll hand over to you. Thank you.
Thank you, Rosie. Yeah, hi everyone, and yeah, thank you for coming and letting us talk to you today. I'm going to run through a bit, like Rosie says, a bit of the background of Flood Re, kind of what we're here for, what the point is, and some of the things that we are trying to help people with. So if I move the slides along. So we were set up in 2016 as a short to medium term solution to what had become a really serious problem with getting affordable insurance for previously flooded homes. So we have a very specific purpose, and that is to promote and enable the availability and affordability of flood insurance for eligible homes, and to manage over its lifetime a transition to a risk reflective market. So that means to sort of get us to a place where we can go back to a world without Flood Re, but flood insurance is still kind of affordable and accessible even to homes that have been previously flooded. So there's a little bit about climate change. I'm sure I don't need to kind of tell you all like how much climate change is impacting our weather systems and the way that we live, but there's some really interesting stats here. 1 in 4 properties in the UK is now at risk of being flooded. So that's 25%, which is absolutely huge. In the past 2 years, we've gone from 1 in 6 to 1 in 5, and now it's 1 in 4. So it's really rapidly increasing. And 2024 was the warmest year on record, about 1.55 degrees above that pre-industrial level. So that's a really significant increase in global warming. I think, as you're probably all well aware, the last year and a half, it's been a pretty constant string of storms, a lot of them named. So these weather events are no longer kind of restricted to a storm season, so to speak. We get them through the summer, we get them through the winter, they just sort of keep coming at us. So as an insurance perspective, this is a little bit about how much we've been spending on floods since back to 2007. Now those really enormous floods in 2007 were really the catalyst for kind of the formation of Flood Re. A lot of properties were not able to get insurance, or the premiums or excesses were so high that people were having to almost self-insure, and so something had to be done. And what came out of that was what we called the Statement of Principles, which meant that insurers were obliged to offer a renewal to a homeowner that had cover with them, but they weren't obliged to keep the price of that down. So again, we were sort of seeing really unaffordable premiums for home insurance. And so the insurance industry and the government got together to devise a solution for that long term. And the result is Flood Re. And so, as you can see, like that, the 2007 floods have been really, really expensive, but this enormous amount of money gets paid out for flood insurance when we have these big events. And it's probably worth mentioning here, it's not just the cost of rebuilding a home or restoring the contents. Often when somebody is flooded, they can be out of their home for 9, 18 months at a time. And the cost of that alternative accommodation forms part of that flood claim. So these claims can be absolutely enormous. Now, this is how Flood Re works. So we sit very much in the background. We are essentially what we call a reinsurer. So every insurer in the UK that sells home insurance has to pay into a levy. So they pay a set amount per policy that they write. So everyone pays proportionally into this pot, which is essentially how Flood Re is funded. After that, they can choose whether they want to use the Flood Re scheme or not. And once they've done that, they then choose which policies they send over to us. So a lot of people think that insurers send us everything that looks kind of really floody, but that's not necessarily the case. Some insurers like to retain a bit of that risk and accept that they will be paying out on some of those claims, but they also get to keep the premium. And I guess that's the next bit of that. So when an insurer passes a policy over to us, we take just the flood part of that home insurance policy. So fire and theft is retained by the insurer. If a flood happens, then the insurer just pays out for the claim, and then we reimburse the insurer, if that makes sense. So we kind of sit in the background, and a lot of people who are kind of reinsured by Flood Re for the flood part of their policy might not even be aware of it. And to be honest, it's probably not that necessary, as long as, you know, the flood cover's in place. Now, to get the affordability marker that we were aiming for, we set our premiums according to council tax band. So the premiums are all on our website, which we can sort of follow up with links for, but council tax bands A and B pay a smaller premium, and council tax bands G and H pay a larger premium. And that's sort of the closest we can get to an affordability scale for homes in the UK. So if I move along, so eligibility, this is one that we get asked quite a lot. Am I eligible for Flood Re? There is a really snazzy tool on our website where you can put your address in and find out if you are eligible. But we've got some big hitter eligibility criteria, which I'll go through. So the first one that we sort of get asked about most of the time is the fact that a property needs to have been built before 2009. Now, the reason for this is that new building regulations were introduced in 2009, which essentially mean we should be using more flood resilient materials. We shouldn't be building in floodplains. Homes that are a bit newer that have been sort of built more recently, theoretically should be more flood resilient. We know that's not necessarily the case, and that's something that we're having sort of discussions about all the time. But currently that is a hard and fast rule for Flood Re eligibility. It has to be a residential property, so we can't take on anything that looks like a commercial business. So even sort of small and medium enterprises, because it's a completely different nature of insurance, and it has to be occupied. So the other things that are ineligible are big blocks of flats. So we will take a property that's split into 3 units. If you imagine maybe a house that's been kind of converted into 3 different flats, that would be eligible for Flood Re, as long as the rest of the eligibility criteria is met. But sort of big blocks of 20 or 30 flats wouldn't be eligible, because those kinds of buildings tend to be covered by a management company that own the leasehold. And that operates like a business, and therefore it becomes ineligible. So the full eligibility criteria is on our website. There's a few more bits and pieces that we probably haven't got time to go into. But if there are questions on whether a property is eligible, we have a really amazing support team who are, again, we can share the email, it's support@floodre.co.uk, but they answer a lot of questions about whether a property is eligible or whether there's sort of questions about whether it should be. So this is just a really nice slide that proves that FloodRe is working. So before we came into being, only 9% of people with a previous claim could get 2 or more quotes, and no one could get 10 or more quotes for insurance. But now with FloodRe, both of those numbers have jumped up to over 90%, which is great. And houses with a previous flood claim has seen a reduction of more than 50% in their premium. So we know that we're making flood insurance definitely available and affordable to those homes that are eligible. So I mentioned earlier that we are a limited lifespan company. This is the first time I've ever been in a job where I'm working hard to get myself out of having a job, but we are set to end in 2039. And that is written in statute. It's part of the Water Act. And so we have been tasked with finding our way to a marketplace that can sustain affordable insurance for flooding without a need for FloodRe. So we've got loads of activities going on to try and achieve that, one of which is Build Back Better, which I'm going to talk to you about today. I won't go into some of the other ones, but a couple of the other things that we're looking at is developing a centre of excellence so that we can put more time and energy into researching flood and flood resilience. And we're looking at a flood performance certificate based on the sort of the premise of an energy performance certificate that would look at a home's kind of flood risk and then detail any measures that have been put in to increase the resiliency and how much that has reduced the risk. But really today we're here to talk about Build Back Better. So let me move on to that. So Build Back Better is a scheme whereby on eligible claims for an insurer that's signed up to the scheme, we will reimburse up to £10,000 extra premium specifically to be spent on increasing a property's flood resistance or flood resilience. So that means either keeping the water out as much as possible, or if the water gets in, being able to remove it quickly, sweep it out, sanitize and carry on living. Now, the way that this works is quite complex and convoluted. So we spend a lot of our time trying to explain to people how it works. Now, because insurance is set to return someone to the point they were in before the loss, this additional money is on top of that. We sort of call that betterment. So we had to get special permission from the government to be able to do this, which means that insurers need to sign up themselves and agree to do it. And they also have to agree to a set of principles. One of those principles, and probably the most important one for us, is that they offer it out to their customers in the same way, regardless of whether that policy is being passed over to FloodRe or not. And so we've got quite a lot of insurers signed up for this already. We've got about 77% of the market has committed, and actually it's about 72% that is live. The insurers that have signed up are, again, on our website. Now, one of the things that I think causes a lot of confusion is where insurance is bought through what we call an intermediary. So like, I don't want to name any intermediaries, but you've got your sort of big insurers and they might have smaller companies selling policies on their behalf. Now, where you've got those smaller companies that are selling those policies, they also need to have signed up for Build Back Better. And we're sort of working to try and get as many of those signed up as we can. But at the moment, it's really just the major insurers that are doing it, with a couple of exceptions. If you go via a broker, then that's a different story because they're not actually writing the policy. But what we say when it comes to making sure that you're going to get Build Back Better on your policy is, before you commit to buy, ask whoever it is you're speaking to, will I be able to have Build Back Better as part of this policy if I get flooded? I think that is the best way to make sure that you're going to get this benefit. Now, insurers are permitted to set some parameters that mean that they can sort of direct that benefit to customers that need it the most. So what a lot of them have done is set a minimum claims value. So Build Back Better wouldn't apply to a small flood claim of 1,000 or 2,000, but it would kick in once a claim reaches the value of maybe 10,000 or 15,000, say. They can also set other parameters, like, for example, maybe after, only after a second flood, or perhaps only river flooding, or if a home has a certain flood risk score. We don't have any control over that. As long as they're offering it to the same people in the same way, then that means that they are fulfilling their obligations with regards to the rules. The money is in addition to the flood claim, so it's kind of just the extra bit on top. So if your door is damaged in a flood and needs to be replaced, the cost of the door would be £1,000 and a flood door would be 1,500. Then the main claim money would pay for the first 1,000, and then the extra 500 would come out of that Build Back Better fund. We would expect for a proper survey to be done so that we know that the right measures are being put in place for that particular property, because where a flood door might work for one property, it might not be as effective for another one. So we expect a professional to assess the property and make a decision on what is the best sort of solution for each individual case. So what we are going to give you a few examples of houses that have had PFR installed, I think. No. So this is Sandra. She's on our website. We've got a few case studies up there that are only a few minutes long, but definitely worth a watch. And these really kind of do bring it to life. Now, Sandra had to spend 17 months, like I said, in alternative accommodation. And she said it was the most disruptive thing. You're not in necessarily not accommodation just down the road with your, church on Sunday and knitting group and Pilates on a Tuesday. You could be miles and miles away from everything you know. It's such a long time being away from your network. Paul from Bewdley, he had to spend 15 months in a 2-bedroom flat with his partner and their 2 teenage children, if you can imagine that, for nearly a year and a half. We've got one from Gordon in Ballater. He came home on Hogmanay to find his Christmas tree knocked over and a river of mud through the whole house. So I don't know where you even start with that at 1 or 2 o'clock in the morning. And Roy from Worksop, he's one of our actual Build Back Better case studies on the website. And he says that he can see the water coming up from down the bottom of the field. He's got some light aluminium slot-in barriers. He's got loads of time to get those pushed in, and then he can just sit back and he and his wife can watch the floodwaters come, and then they go, and then he just carries on living. He says it's absolute peace of mind to know that that water's not going to come into his house and ruin its things again. So if I move on, we did a really cool thing last year where we showcased a garden at the Chelsea Flower Show. So I don't know if we've got any keen gardeners in the on the call, but what we were doing was really trying to show people how adaptation of outdoor space can be almost as effective or just as effective as making changes to a property when it comes to flood resilience. So this is the garden. What we're showing is that we've disconnected the downpipes here, and we're catching and holding the water. So in the UK, we are taking green space away at a really rapid rate. So when we get these really big storms and we get a month's worth of rain in a day, it needs ground to soak away into. And what we're doing is we're paving over that ground with AstroTurf, with concrete driveways, with outbuildings. And so that water is getting displaced into the streets, and it's overwhelming drains that are either blocked or just simply not big enough for the volume of water. And so what we were trying to show with this garden is if everyone can just catch and hold a bit of that water in those storms, we relieve the pressure on those drains, and it stops that water kind of rushing into the streets and carrying away our cars and flooding our basements. 87% of the UK has a garden, and 1 in 8 gardens has already experienced the effects of being flooded. And I have another pretty interesting stat. In London alone, we are covering over an area the size of 2.5 times Hyde Park every year, like I said, with AstroTurf, outbuildings, concrete driveways, etc. So we really are kind of championing the idea of greening the grey and bringing back more green space, more soil to help soak that rain away. Even something such as a planter outside a front door would catch and hold that amount of water and let it soak away more slowly rather than rushing straight into the drains. So this garden is being relocated to Howbury Park, which is in Oxfordshire. It will be open in later on this year, and we'll be free to visit, open to the public, attached to a tea room. And so we'll be able to use this to continue educating people on the adaptation of outdoor space. And if you can see just in the foreground, there's a little pond there, which when you dig a pond in the garden and channel the water down from it, it can act as a sump. So you can divert water away from your property and then it either soak away or evaporate, and kind of removes it from lapping up against your front door. So it really gives us an opportunity to reach a new audience. And the cool thing about this is that Build Back Better funds can be spent on adaptation of outdoor space if that is identified as the best use of the money by the survey that takes place. So I think I probably have some questions to answer on Build Back Better, and so I don't want to kind of go into too much technical detail if it's not the right area. I'd rather look at the questions and see what you guys would like to ask.
Thank you, Emma. Thank you, brilliant. We have had a couple of questions in the chat, so I'll address those first. Just one being, when you're looking at comparison sites for insurance policies, would the scheme, would Build Back Better or would Flood Re be mentioned on those sites?
I think at the moment we probably are not mentioned. So I think when you're looking at price comparison sites as well, you're often being shown offers from a lot of the intermediaries, like I mentioned. So they might not have signed up to, they could be using Flood Re, and you could be sort of getting access to those Flood Re premiums, but not necessarily Build Back Better. So like I say, it's always best to call and check. You can still go through a price comparison site, but if you get say this insurer offering a price, give them a call and ask them if they're part of the Build Back Better and if your property would be eligible before committing to buy.
Brilliant, thank you. And then I have a question just about the survey that you've mentioned that you'd need to have to assess the measures that you'd be able to put in place through Build Back Better. How does the survey, who pays for that survey to be done?
That would be organised by the insurer and paid for as part of the claim. But the Build Back Better funds can be used to pay for that survey. It's slightly more specialist, but that would just be part of a normal claim process after a flood.
Right, brilliant, thank you. Just a reminder, folks, if you have got any questions, please pop them into the chat and we can pull them out for you and ask Emma. But if you have, in the lack of any questions in the chat, I'll just reach to the questions on some frequently asked questions on your page. Maybe you can go into a bit more detail just about what's covered. Can people claim for things like their outbuildings? To what extent is their property covered by these schemes?
Sure. So outbuildings would be covered under a main claim so long as water has entered the main dwelling. I think that's the rule. But where it comes to Build Back Better, that money is designed specifically to be spent increasing a property's flood resilience. So I think it would depend on whether that outbuilding had an effect on flood resilience in the future. I think it's more likely sort of some of the measures that we sort of see most often are self-closing air bricks, because sort of that's a really sort of quick ingress for water below kind of the floor level. Flood doors and barriers. There's a lot of cost neutral measures that can be put in. So raising electrical sockets up the wall so that the wiring's out of the floor, putting appliances on plinths so that if it's just a few inches of water, they're saved. You can get some really beautiful looking flood resistant kitchens now. Taking up carpets and putting down tiles with waterproof adhesive. That just means you can kind of sweep that water out, sanitize it and carry on. I know that I was going to mention Flood Mary, who, if anyone hasn't heard of Flood Mary, be sure to go and check her out. Maybe we can follow up with a link to her site. She's got loads and loads of amazing tips, but she swears by puddle pumps, which is just it's a little thing about this wide, and it'll keep water down to just millimeters high. Sorry, I saw the chat come up.
The chat go live. Yeah, we have got another question in the chat, but I also noticed that Paul, you've had your hand raised for a little while, so if you wanted to come in and ask your question,
yes,
you go ahead and just unmute yourself. Thanks.
Yeah, thank you very much. Now, it's disappointing to hear that I have to make a claim first, because I've been flooded 6 times and never made a claim. the first occasion took some old carpet, and after that we did in fact put laminate floor, not laminate flooring down, but a flooring that's stuck to the engineered floor basically, so that it will stand the water. We've done all of the other things. We also built a retaining wall around the house, and interesting enough, we've got a sump built into the garden now, and this is an amazing fact that even blew me away. Over the winter, because we've got this solar thing, I can see exactly what I'm using very, very accurately. That pump, when it kicks in, actually shows up on there. And over the winter, that was cutting in every half an hour, automatically on level, and throughout 24 hours, each time it cuts in, it does 1.2 cubic meters. So every hour, that pump was shifting 2.4 cubic meters from my garden area, just groundwater basically, because we deliberately left the bottom part of the sump ungrouted, so it's pulling in groundwater. And what's amazing, over 24 hours, we pumped out of my garden into the lake adjacent the equivalent of 2 articulated tanker trailers of water. Yeah, so one of the problems we have in our location is in the winter time, the groundwater is so close to the surface that, yeah, we have to carefully manage it and get on top of it. And I wish I'd known about this scheme earlier, because I spent so much money on hardening the property and its surroundings, which I'll never see back again. But yeah, every time I try something new, Mother Nature finds a new way in.
Yeah. Well, I'm sorry to hear that, but well done for some self-protection, because at least then that gives you a bit of peace of mind that that you are protected against the flood, and ultimately that's kind of the most important thing. A lot of the people that are like the case studies that I mentioned on the website are all people that have taken it upon themselves to protect themselves. Like Build Back Better has only been live for a couple of years now, and we're still learning quite a lot as we go. Again, we had to get special permission from Parliament to be able to do it, and it's quite a complex process, and every insurer is offering it out in quite a different way. There's either a different maximum amount or a different claims trigger or a different parameters. So it's sort of the benefit, I guess, varies from insurer to insurer, even within that world. And again, the way that it's been set up, the permission that we got to do it allows for that variation. We sort of set the guidelines, but then the specifics of it really are down to each individual insurer.
So Emma, just I've noticed in the chat, and thank you, Paul. I think that's a really valid, observation and reflection, that actually you've already made these measures, and we wish that it existed a long time ago potentially. But Emma, is the best advice then to speak directly to insurers to understand, the direct parameters that might relate to their policy, and is that how best to understand at which point you might be able to access those
yeah,
measures?
Absolutely. We certainly can't recommend one insurer above the other. We wouldn't do that. But the insurers that are live with Build Back Better are listed on our website, which we can share the link directly to that. We also make a note of any insurers that are committed but not yet live. And like I say, when you're dealing with intermediaries, so these are the companies that are selling on behalf of one of the big insurers. So they don't actually necessarily take on the liability themselves, but they have permission to write policies. Those kind of intermediaries would have needed to sign up for Build Back Better. So unless you're talking to an insurance broker, then I would check the website and ask the question. And if you're not sure, or if they can't give you a straight answer, then I would go back to the list and see who else is out there.
Thank you. We have got another question in the chat, just about whether you're able to advise or support social housing providers at all.
So when it comes to social housing, that's a little bit the same as kind of the blocks of flats issue. So we can Flood-Re is available for contents-only policies in social housing, but I think because the council would insure the building, that would be a commercial venture, and therefore the building's part wouldn't be eligible. But you could certainly get contents with Flood-Re.
Great, thank you. And again, folks, if you've got any further questions for Emma, please pop them in the chat and we can pull them out for you. I'll just have another look at your frequently asked questions, or if there's anything else that you feel like you could have elaborated on that you didn't feel like you had time to, Emma, please dip back in and elaborate further. I'll just have a look here for you.
Oh, there's another hand up.
Yep, it's me, Rosanna, Councillor Pauline Crockett. My ward is Queenswood area, so North Herefordshire, and it was me who put in the question about the social providers, because my area has got a fair bit of that does flood, and they flood again and again, like you say. But my observation and question, and I'm really disappointed that Paul hasn't been able to access any support before now, but I think Herefordshire Council have a responsibility to put all this information on the Talk Community website. And Rosanna, I would hope you could do that through the communication channel at the council, because all this information should be out there for everybody, not just us who've come on this call. Because it's a bigger picture than that. So if you could do that, that would be much appreciated. Thank you.
Absolutely. I think there's been a lot of work done to the dedicated flooding pages on the council website. So the hope is that information can all be stored and kept up to date. I think the feeling has been that having that resource on the council website so that we can make sure that all that content goes on there, and this recording and the advice that we're being able to glean from these sessions will absolutely be put on there as well. So thank you.
But Talk Community is a really good communication tool that we are really gathering traction with, and I think it needs to go out to all of those parishes, etc., that sign up to it.
Okay, thank you. Yeah, absolutely, take that. Great. We did have another question, and maybe you could just add a bit of clarity, Emma, about whether the measures are available prior to flooding. Are historic claims able to be referred to, or is it only after floods that you can access this support?
It is only after a flood, I'm afraid. It does suck that you kind of have to go through being flooded in order to access this benefit, but there's an awful lot that you can do sort of to protect yourself before a flood. And like I say, Flood Mary's website has a load of tips and tricks. So historically we've heard people talk about sandbags. They're actually terrible defenses against being flooded. They burst and fail in seconds. But you can get something called a flood sack, which will absorb something like 23 litres of water. So those are reasonably priced. You can get things like a pan seal or a toilet bung that can go down the toilet to stop any backflow coming up through that way. Mary recommends putting aluminium tape around your door seal, and that will hold for, I can't remember how long she timed it for, but for quite some time now. I would definitely recommend going to have a look at her website. Thank you, James, for those resources. And then if you when insurance comes around next, make sure you get a policy that will benefit from Build Back Better. And I think the presiding information would definitely be have a flood plan in place. So I think Mary speaks to this. She says when it happens, your brain goes to spaghetti and you forget all the things that you've got to do. So make a plan, write it down, keep your valuables upstairs, have some wellies or vases that you can put your table legs in, like figure out what you're going to do with your furniture, have a pack ready with a portable charger and your phone numbers and your insurance details somewhere safe, so that if it happens, you can grab that and you know what your plan is. You've got something to stick to. But yeah, to get Build Back Better, unfortunately, you do have to go through a flood, but that doesn't preclude you from, like Paul, doing some measures of protecting yourself in advance.
And we've had a question in the chat just about accessing information if they're not users of Herefordshire Council or are not aware of Talk Community. Chris, thank you for your question on that one. And I think, as Emma's said, you know, that there are those resources out there that we're trying to publicise and share. But Emma, have you got any other sort of hints or tips on how to access information that might not be?
We do try to spread our information around as much as possible. I know a lot of the insurers that we work with have got Build Back Better specific or flood specific information on their websites. We post regularly on Twitter and LinkedIn, so you know, feel free to follow us on social media if you're involved in social media. I guess, yeah, it's about spreading the word, so as many people as possible, spreading the word and getting the information out there.
Thank you. We do still have a few minutes left, folks. So if you do have any more specific questions for Emma on Flood Re or the Build Back Better scheme, do pop them into the chat and we can address those. Got a few minutes left. So
I have just seen the comment about that mentions the grant. Like Build Back Better can be used in like alongside a grant. It's not one or the other. So if you are able to benefit from an Environment Agency grant, then absolutely kind of pursue that, because Build Back Better kind of would go alongside that. It's not one or the other. You can have both. Unfortunately, the nature of how we work as an insurer does preclude us from handing out free money in case of a flood. I think the nature of insurance itself is it has to be reactive after an event, and so that also has to apply to Build Back Better. You know, I wish we could build back before, but unfortunately, that's just not possible.
We have got a couple of hands raised. Colin, you're first, so please come in if you want to unmute yourself. Thank you.
Okay, yeah. Good afternoon, Emma. It's Colin Taylor. I'm the flood warden down in Herefordshire. We had resilient bits and pieces fitted to lots of our properties after the 2020 flood. And then, unfortunately, in the next flood, a lot of it failed. So is there a scheme, a government scheme, to make sure the equipment, door, flood barriers, sandbags, all the things you can buy, is there any sort of guarantees, or does the government sort of warrant the products these people sell us?
So there is a code of practice for the flood industry that people can take up and go through the training if they're a surveyor or if they're an installer, or, you know, all the various sort of pieces along the journey of having property flood resilience products installed. And so, you know, we ask our insurers to work with reputable suppliers and installers that have had this training, that are specialists in this field. Most of these products, like you said, the doors and the barriers should be tested after they've been fit. So without more information, it's hard to sort of be able to speculate why they failed, but I am sorry to hear that they did.
Well, unfortunately, that's a problem. You know, we spend thousands and thousands of pounds per dwelling down here, and of course, the only way to test them is the next flood. And of course, when that flood comes and it fails, it's a lot, you know, hardship, you know, and that concerned me a lot about the inaccurate, you know, the lack of expertise on the equipment and the people coming down to fit it. So I'm hoping that there will be a code of practice or some standardization done, or a kite mark, or whatever you want to call it. But
there absolutely is. There is a kite mark for property flood resilience products, although a lot of these products actually work without having to go through that testing. It really depends on the kind of product it is. But there are, the PFR industry is still in its early days, I guess. I think it's a supply and demand issue, but it is growing, and there are reputable installers out there. We have a couple that we work with, well, not that we work with, but that our insurers work with, delivering Build Back Better with really good responses. So I think, James, is there any information we can share about that network, or is there?
We can certainly share things on the code of practice and the work that Ian's doing.
I know that there is going to be an industry body that's being formed as we speak. I think it's going to be launched in June to kind of govern the sale and installation of PFR sort of bring that sector a bit more into focus. But I think that's still kind of in its formation at the moment.
Okay, thank you.
Great. Thanks both. We've probably got time for one more question, but I just want to reassure everyone that we'll be sharing all the resources that get spoken about today, all the links that are in the chat. We'll make sure that everybody gets access to those, and we'll be putting them online as well. And if you have any other questions, then we will be putting contact details in any follow-up communications for you to reach out to Flood about any specifics. But Paul, if you wanted to come in with your question, I know you've had your hand raised. Thank you.
No problem. Yeah, I after one of the flooding events, I forget which one now, I tried to keep them out of my mind. We did opt for the free, well, there was a grant and it got us a free flood risk property assessment and so on. One of the things I found with that is it focused very much on the building itself rather than as I have focused, and I think other people might benefit from. And one of your slides I thought was very early on with the postman up to his ankle, up to his shins in water with that gateway across the gate.
Yeah.
And rather than considering your house as a castle, it's the outer bailey that we have found is very important. If you can keep the water outside your outer bailey, then your keep it doesn't matter so much how that is. And I think that aluminium barrier, I don't know, this is not an advert for these people, but if you've got the identity of whoever put that in, I'd be very interested in it, because that would be ideal on my driveway.
That might be one for you, James. I don't know if we know that or if we can share it, but I think if you do a search for aluminium flood barrier, you'll probably only have a few results to look at.
Okay, I'm writing that down because I've got a excellent memory. It's just very short.
Aluminium slot-in flood barrier.
Aluminium slot-in flood barrier.
Brilliant. I know we said we only had time for one more, but I did notice one in the chat from Chris about whether there are homes within the flood, whether there's information on homes within the flood area that could benefit from schemes. And I know, Emma, that there is information on your website about which homes and how to identify whether your home would be viable. Is that right?
So that's the eligibility for the flood scheme itself. Build Back Better should be available to all customers for a particular insurer in the same way. So that 2009 build date doesn't apply. But yeah, again, for Build Back Better itself, check with the insurer. And yeah, there is an eligibility tool on our website that will be able to tell you if your home is eligible for flood recover.
Fantastic. Well, thanks all. Thanks so much, Emma, and for all of your questions and your attendance. It's been great to have you. And again, the questions, the recording and the slides will all be circulated, but that is unfortunately all that we've got time for. So we'll look forward to the next session where we can explore another topic.
Thank you for having us.
Thanks all.
Thank you very much. Very good.